Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. Section 1 of Senate Bill 47 on page 2 would require school districts to list the names and email addresses of current school board members on the school district's website. And the school district would also have to send that list to the State Department of Education, who would be required to maintain a database of that information from every school district on the State Department's website. And the list would be required to be updated as necessary. Section 1 of the bill would also authorize local school board members to add new items to board meeting discussions under the category of new business and ask questions or engage in discussion with members of the public at any school board meeting. The bill would also require that each local school board meeting, including any virtual meetings, include time for a public comment period. Moving on to Section 2 of the bill. Current law authorizes payment of annual dues to the Kansas Association of School Boards. On page 3, the bill would strike that explicit reference and instead state that dues would be for annual membership in a not-for-profit organization that provides guidance, resources, and other services to member school districts. Section 3 of the bill would explicitly state that school board members may access school district property during school hours or when there are school or community activities on the property. The bill also includes some technical amendments and would take effect on July 1 upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, committee. What questions do we have for the reviser? Senator Starnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. Aren't school districts already doing this?
Reviser?
I believe school districts could do this if they chose to. I don't know that necessarily all of them are or that they are required to do so by law.
Other questions? Senator Petty.
So, Tamara, we don't have, or maybe it's just been in bills in the past, we don't have about the names of the board members being on the school district website? That's not already in statute? I'm sorry.
I don't believe that requirement is already in statute. Again, some school districts are probably already doing that. I don't know that it's in statute. If you're remembering this was a bill from last year.
Okay.
Yes.
So, but there's, so does this bill also then maintain that there, I mean, I understand the part about a comments time for board meetings, but does it mandate that there has to be then a back and forth dissertation between a person who asks the question and a board member?
So if you look on page 2, kind of starting in line 19, it says any member of a board may, and then if you skip down to line 22, ask questions or otherwise engage in discussion with any member of the public addressing the board at a school board meeting. So that is a may there.
Thank you.
Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess kind of related to that, Tamara, would the draft language, I guess, override board policy if they say that, like, in public comment, that it's not for dialogue? Is that kind of how this is phrased, that it would override any policy that would dictate that a board member could not engage with the public in the public meeting? I just want to check the the wording of this and the action.
Can we send him out some more?
Yeah, so if state law required it, school districts would be required to comply with state law.
Okay. And as a second question, the wording, would it provide for required public comment in each and every open meeting of a Board of Education, or just at regular meetings? Or I just want to characterize the scope of when a public comment period would be required in the draft.
Yeah, so if you look on page 2, starting in line 24, that paragraph 6 states that each meeting held by a Board of Education, including any meeting that is held virtually, shall include time for a public comment portion of the meeting.
Committee, other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will move to proponent testimony, and we will give 3 minutes to all conferees on this hearing. Cassandra Barton, Head of School, Insight School of Kansas. Is Cassandra here? Is she on WebEx, Cassandra? Okay, we will check and see if we can find her. Tracy Frederick, Director of Engagement Strategy. Welcome to committee.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of SB 47. I am Dr. Tracy Frederick, Director of Engagement and Strategy for the Kansas School Board Resource Center, and I've served as an educator for 30 years, serving in public school classrooms, having taught freshman English, also having taught students who were working towards certification in community colleges, and those students who were aspiring for higher education degrees or higher degrees in four-year universities. I have worked with school boards in all different kinds of capacities and have always served as the individual who's thinking about the student who sits at the back of the classroom. And that's why I come to you today to speak in support of SB 47. Many school board members tell us that current school policies create barriers to communication between parents, students, community members, and school board members, preventing collaborative processes to improve student outcomes. Recent data shows that 1/3 of students in Kansas public schools are below grade level, and 1/3 are not proficient in math and reading, and SB 47 overrides those existing school board policies that prevent open, student-focused communication and collaboration that's needed to improve outcomes. According to a 2023 survey from the Kansas Association of School Boards, of the 252 respondents they cited as approximately 85% of unique school districts in Kansas, 23% of those districts do not provide contact information for school board members like USD 288 Central Heights. And 30% do not provide direct contact information for school board members. This means hundreds of parents and teachers and constituents, community members cannot engage in open communication or those formal lines of communication with school board members, leaving those to the aisles at Walmart or the aisles at Dillon's or maybe at church. But those are the kinds of communications that they are relegated to without that contact, email, name information on those websites. Many school board members have Many school boards have ceded control of their agendas so that school board members are unable to bring information about or ask questions or bring agenda items about school improvement or outcomes improvement to the agenda, and they're dismissed or publicly humiliated just because they didn't have because of that policy, even though they had requested that. So that in those agenda setting meetings between the superintendent and the board chair, those are dismissed repeatedly. We also know that board members are prohibited from engaging in the conversations that would help them to understand more deeply the issues that constituents bring to the board. So in those public meetings or in those public comment sections of the board, they are then unable to engage in those deeper understandings for the entire board to hear. So we ask that you hopefully will be able to vote in favorable passage of this SB 47.
Thank you. Committee, we do have proponent written testimony from Mike O'Neill, Kansas Policy Institute, and with that, we will open it up for questions for the proponent. Are there any questions? Senator Petty.
So my question would be for Tracy, who just testified. Tracy, thank you.
Senator Petty, thank you.
Except I was somewhat taken aback by the comments you made about override open school progress. I don't know what that means.
Perhaps it was Perhaps I misspoke, but what I'm talking about is the open communication for school board members to engage in conversations with constituents, with parents, in those board meetings about outcomes improvement and student performance. Is that what you're?
No, I'm actually just quoting, I wrote down the words you said, override open school progress. And
oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. Probably what you're referring to was my comments about SB 47. That would then, as I mentioned, override those barriers to communication between board members and between their constituents, the policies that are in place for some school boards.
So your perception is that currently there's no you feel like every board meeting should be an opportunity for open dialogue between the board members and someone who comes. I mean, I've been to many school board meetings. I've not been on a school board, but I've taught in a school district. And a lot of times parents do bring forward, a specific concern, but I, as a board member, might not have any knowledge about that specific concern, and so it could be detrimental to the work environment for me to make any comments in that situation. And you might be making it specifically to me about a specific person. So is it a little bit of maybe overreach and lack of respect for confidentiality for the employee and the students?
I appreciate the question, Senator Petty, and I respectfully disagree and give you a couple of different examples, real-life examples. One school board that I've observed and have worked with, they do not allow anything other than the board member to ask a clarifying yes or no question to the person who's bringing something to the board. So therefore, any kind of delving into any kind of issue or dialogue with digging a little bit deeper into something that's going on just doesn't happen, which then creates this misconception and then holds back any deeper understanding of the issue that's there. Another school board, however, that I've observed that have engaged in questions that have been brought up to the school board very respectfully, a really great, productive conversation. Everybody in the board's been able to hear those comments, have been able to ask some of those questions, and they've been able to move forward that agenda much, much more quickly. They've been able to understand the issue more deeply. They've been able to address some of the conversations or the comments or some of the concerns directly. But assuming that there's going to be a negative or hostile situation really negates all the productivity that is going on in some of these school board meetings that allow for engagement of these board members with people who are offering conversation or offering issues, much like we are right now.
Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Frederick, thank you for your testimony today. I can personally attest to being impacted by some of the practices that you're seeking to address and or that the bill seeks to address, both as a board member and as a citizen. One question for you is tied to the required inclusion of public comment. Are there meetings that a Board of Education might hold where it would be appropriate to not hold a public comment period? Such as special meetings or meetings that are outside of the regular order of business?
There are, and there are times when that happens right now. Yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm getting, so the bill as drafted would state that any meeting held, any open meeting held by the Board of Education would be required to have a public comment. And I guess my question to you is that, would there be times that a Board of Education would meet that it would be acceptable to not have any public comment?
If we are engaged in this democratic process, and if those board members are elected officials, I would argue that there should always be, and that they would be able to have those public comments and have those public conversations.
I guess I'll give a specific example and see what your feedback would be.
Sure.
As a Board of Education, you might call an emergency or a special board meeting due to either some sort of crisis or personnel issue, and the intent of the meeting is basically to immediately go into executive session and handle the business that needs to be handled in that particular situation. In that instance, would you be okay with not having a public comment period for like an emergency or a special board meeting, called under those circumstances?
If there would never need to be, even in that kind of situation, a need to preclude any of that public comment prior to.
Senator Starnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Tracy. I just want to make sure with local control, so within this, does this allow the local board's policies to remain in place?
in this, it removes those barriers for those boards that have the policies in place that does not allow that.
So if they chose locally, they have ways to change what that may be by voting people out and/or holding them accountable. So I guess I want to make sure that locally, boards of education continue to have the ability to do what's in the best interests of their local board.
Under, as it states under statutes, that they will, that any policy that overrides that would then, would not fall under the statute.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for
you.
being here. Committee, we do have neutral written from Dr. Tanya Merrigan, Superintendent of Blue Valley Schools. We will now move to opponent testimony. We will begin with Judith Deedy on behalf of Game On for Kansas Schools. And is she on WebEx? No. Okay, we will come back. We will move on to Leah Fleiter, Assistant Executive Director of Advocacy, Kansas Association of School Boards. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good to be back here again. So you have my written testimony in front of you, and I will just address some of our concerns that we have about this bill. First of all, the provision on the mandatory publishing of the email addresses, that does address, that raises cybersecurity concerns for us. I know the legislature has been rightfully concerned about cybersecurity in school districts and in the state government, and so some school boards certainly do publish emails, but not all of them do. Many of them do have like you know, you can say, I want to send this to the board, and you type that in. So the ability for patrons to contact the board is certainly there. Some of the smaller districts don't have the same kinds of monitoring and cybersecurity policies, or actually I should say capacities, that the larger ones do, and so I'm assuming that's why the practices differ across the state. The bill also asks KSDE to add yet another task to its plate, so we would ask who is going to be able to do that job, and is there going to be funding for that FTE. But the larger concern that we have is that this bill asks the legislature to impose standards on school boards that it would not impose on itself. For instance, Madam Chair has an agenda today, you want to hear this bill and you want to work some bills. Senator Thomas comes in and says, Madam Chair, I would like to add an item to the agenda about bald-headed singers in the legislature. Sorry, Senator, but you know, it's low-hanging fruit, right? It's low-hanging fruit. So then Madam Chair is like, okay, so if she's a school board member under this bill, she has to allow you to bring that agenda item. You have to debate it. You know, Senator Murphy is like, no way am I letting him sing during this school board meeting. You know, that type of thing, okay? I'm trying to add a little humor here, but it's an example, right? And, you know, the chair is trying to run her meeting. Now, regarding the public comment process, many boards do allow public comment, but I want to talk about, you know, Madam Chair did a pretty good job yesterday of handling a somewhat tense situation in this committee. There was a public comment, you know, that got rather contentious, right? So boards typically have that policy in place that says we will not interact on the spot with, you know, patron rows, because, as you know, kind of as Senator Petty mentioned, I might not have all the information, or it could be a situation like we had yesterday where tempers were running high, and so, you know, perhaps if that had happened at a board meeting, Senator Argabright might be a board member, and he might be like, I'm coming across the table at that person because they were disrupting Senator Erickson's meeting, right? So that's why boards have those policies in place. So, to wrap up, I would say we have so many things that we would like to work together with the legislature on to support public schools. So let's work on improving reading achievement. Let's work on fully funding SPED. Let's do some things together to support kids and just reject this bill. So thank you.
Thank you. Committee, we have next Jim Carlskin, United School Administrators. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. It's good to be here this afternoon. I'm Jim Carlson with the United School Administrators. Having been a former superintendent and also a principal that was required to go to board meetings, I've been to hundreds of board meetings. And we have a couple of former board member or superintendents on this committee that I'm sure they've had their fair share of them too. You know, the intent of a lot of what's in this bill makes a lot of sense. They want public comment and they want public input. And I understand that. But Ms. Flighter brought up some good examples of what could have happened here. Another example of what, you know, a very pertinent example of what happened last night at a Lawrence School Board meeting where it was a obscene, laced, profane, episode that lasted for almost half an hour of someone coming to a board meeting and just went off the rails. You know, as I said, I've been to hundreds of board meetings, worked with a lot of different school boards, and nearly every one of the provisions in this bill are addressed by local school boards. You know, one thing that I think could be very concerning is if someone just decided I wanted to, and Leo used the example, wanting to put in an item on the agenda. You know, most processes that I've ever worked with is a board member can put an item on the agenda. It needs to be seconded. It needs to be, receive a majority. But even prior to that, when a superintendent and a board chair works up an agenda, there's a process by which you put items on the agenda. And it's usually done, 2 or 3 days before the board meeting. And I'm running out of time, but one thing that usually happens in open meetings is, and it was talked about academics. If somebody has a concern about academics in a school district, they come and make open comment. Well, Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, a teacher, they're terrible and whatever, they can't teach. Now we're bordering on personnel issues that board members can't really comment on in public. So there's a lot of flaws in this bill. And the local control takes care of nearly all the things that's in this bill already. I would encourage this committee not to accept this bill. I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Thank you. And one more try for Judith Deedy. She may have been written only, but we'll give her a chance. Judith? Okay. All right, committee, we do have opponent written testimony. Ben Jones, representative of Kansas for Excellence in Education. Dennis Schultz, Kansas PTA president. And Brent Yeager, superintendent of Olathe Public Schools. And with that, we will open it up for questions for the opponents. Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is probably for Jim. And as you're walking up here, I'll just state, I don't think anybody wants, lack of decorum and fighting in public meetings. We certainly want to respect the responsibility of a board of education to do what they need to do and conduct business without having interruption and chaos that has been mentioned by an example by you and Ms. Flighter. But my question is, if you're a school administrator, school superintendent, who do you report to? Who is your boss?
School board. And
so if you have an issue and you want to go to if you're a patron or a parent and you want to take your issue up, that you've had an issue with the superintendent, who do you go to?
You would probably go to a board member.
A school board, yeah. So, my comments and my questions are going to go around page 2 of the bill regarding public discussion. I had a school district in my district where, so actually this bill, in my opinion, is in response to a lot of the policies that have been adopted by school boards all across our state since COVID and during COVID, where they try to limit and shut down parents who are frustrated by policies and procedures of the districts. Not all my districts adopted these new policies, but some of them have. And these policies are that parents have to get permission to address the board. And I just think that's ludicrous that these are public government boards who are paid by taxpayers, that you can't have an opportunity to go address your elected body. So in one of these school districts, there's a policy that you have to sign up, I think, 2 business days prior to the board meeting. There was an incident, a safety incident in that school district between those 2 business days and the board meeting. the school superintendent did not handle this situation well, did not communicate with parents, and outrage, and as we know, social media, public disarray and miscommunication, or maybe it was proper communication, but it was spread like wildfire. Parents were outraged. They tried to get a hold of their administration, and the response was very flawed, quite frankly, and they wanted to take up their concerns about the safety of their children to the school board. And the school board, and the school administrator would not let them speak to the board because of this 2-day policy. And this bill is addressing that, because if you're a parent and you're concerned about the safety of your child, shouldn't they be able to address their school board?
Senator, I understand your point, and I can see the example that you're raising. You know, as I said, I've been involved in situations like this, and the board policies that we used was, 48 hours in advance or the day before, at least 24 hours, to ask to speak to the board. I think that, things like that, there could be exceptions, but to do a blanket statement to say that anybody can come up at any time and talk is, I think you're, it's a slippery slope.
Well, I think in a democracy or a republic that we want to ensure that folks can speak with their government. I think public comment is so important, and I think this bill probably doesn't go far enough. It probably needs to specify on line 24 that meetings that shall include time for public comment portion of the meeting, despite timelines that are put in place by the Board of Education. So the Board of Education says 2 days. I think we need to clarify that school districts can't limit exactly when that public comment is. But going on line 22 about dialogue with school districts, when 2 parents who signed up for another issue already had signed up for this board meeting, they added to their comments about school safety in the specific incident. And they were not allowed to engage or dialogue with school board members. The school board members just kind of stared at them with blank faces. And then, as you can imagine, that outraged parents even more. And this board meeting was packed full of parents, and these parents had to be asked to leave because they were getting a little heated because there was no dialogue with the board. The board didn't even acknowledge the situation. And so I think this bill is so crucial that there's dialogue and conversation.
Okay. I understand your point, Senator.
Senator Sykes.
Thank you. Jim, if you'll stay up. Some of the comments from my fellow senator have brought kind of questions. And when I was reading the testimony from Ms. Frederick, many school boards have policy that cedes control of the agenda to the board president. And as I was reading that, I was thinking, we do that in the legislature. Our chair has complete authority over this bill. And then as you were talking, do most school boards have kind of a 48 hours or like a public notice of when those meetings are so that?
Yeah, it's in statute that it's in board policy when the agenda is published and how it can be added to the agenda. So yes, it is out there, and a patron can see that, can find that, can visit the board office, or even go online now with the way technology is and find that.
And that's, I think, my concern. I think we are holding one group of elected officials to a higher standard than we're holding ourselves. And I think we could do a better job communicating all of it. But, I mean, the legislature, we have 24 hours that you have to. Sometimes people think that they have submitted requests to testify in person and being denied. So I am, I guess, sympathetic to this, but I think we are trying to hold a certain faction of our elected officials to a different.
And Senator Blaze's comments about, it happened during COVID, and yes, there was a great deal of frustration over COVID, and I do think policies have changed a lot since then in working with the superintendents and the boards that I have, since that time.
Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going to start off with just a little bit of pushback on the characterization, I think, of the public comment period. So the bill prescribes that there will be a public comment period, not that there is, open bar brawl dialogue throughout the meeting, and that's kind of how it's been characterized here. And I don't think that characterizes the nature of the bill. I think this is prescribing a required public comment period wherein the board, through policy, could have control and maintain decorum within the meeting and set expectations, especially, I think probably all boards have a policy that says in public comment, you can refer to the board and to policies, but you cannot refer to personnel. We will cut you off and ask you to stop making your comments, right? So I don't think that any of that goes away. So I'd like to make that clear that I don't read that. I don't read that necessarily in this bill. I did have one question. Ms. Flighter, you mentioned that publishing the Board of Education's emails could pose an undue cybersecurity threat to the district. And I guess my question would be, how so? All of our legislative emails are published and out in the public domain. U.S. Congress is the same way. Any number of government agencies and entities. So, and actually many school districts not only publish their Board of Education's emails, but also the emails of all of their staff. So I'm just curious how this bill and the requirement of publishing the elected officials' emails poses an untoward cybersecurity risk to the district.
Thank you for the question. The legislature, Congress have presumably a more robust cybersecurity protection system in place than, say, every single school board in the state. And so, as I mentioned, some of the larger districts do publish because they feel like they have the protocols in place. But we have many of our smaller districts where that might be more difficult, and so they try to protect their system by having the emails come through that, I want to email the board members and here's what I want to say. I think I mentioned in my testimony that, and honestly, seriously, when I was on the Manhattan board, we got an email from our board clerk one time. No, Superintendent Wade, Dr. Wade, did not email and ask you to buy gift cards, okay? It happens, right? And so luckily, the Manhattan-Ogden, it's a large district, they had a system that flagged that, right? So that's what we're talking about, is that just this one-size-fits-all mandate doesn't work.
So then, do you advise small districts with less robust cybersecurity to not provide district official emails to their elected officials at all?
Not at all. And if you look on their website, I mean, I haven't looked at all 286 websites in the state, but my experience has been that some will have everybody on the Manhattan-Ogden board, their website. Others will have a form that says, I want to contact the board. I think Senator Starnes probably is familiar with that, working at like Riley County or Wabunsee, where you then, you type in your message and then it is sent by the email system to the entire board. And so my assumption is that it is, checked for security issues before it goes to the board.
But KASB would still advise school districts that every board member have their own official email for district communications, correct?
There's some, the district has to have a way of getting in touch with the board if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to understand the enhanced cybersecurity risk, I guess, is what I'm trying, because in my experience, and I think it would be advisable that any public official at a Board of Education have an official email address, especially to be in compliance with the Kansas Open Records Act. And so the emails themselves necessarily need to exist even in a small Board of Education. I guess that's kind of why I'm...
Okay, so I think we're talking about two different things. Publishing them on the KSDE website then opens the boards, every single board in the state, up to anybody who can log on to the KSDE website can start spamming those school boards. So I apologize if I didn't understand your question.
Yeah, and certainly that's fair. I think it's a balancing act of balancing, transparency and citizens' rights and cybersecurity, and I understand that delicate balance, so thank you.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I guess I'll have Jim come back up here. So, as a, well, in your role now as a lobbyist, but as a former superintendent, has there ever been situations where in board meetings that you would have, or have you, would you have, as a superintendent, advised your board members that it could lead to a lawsuit or some sort of particular issue if they commented about certain subjects in a public board meeting?
Yes, I have told board members, when they respond to questions, be careful, especially in an open meeting, be careful how you respond, because you could be held liable for what you say.
Would that be true that for the district could be held liable
Yes.
too, because they're our board members? That's my concern. I mean, I wasn't a board member, but I was a commissioner, and we had this similar thing about taking public comment and listening, and then having a vehicle for what responses would come back, but not in that, at that particular time, because you may or may not know all the circumstances.
Yeah, and board members have to, and, you know, school administrators, they have to be very careful about what they say and how they respond to a complaint of, because, you know, I remember one night we got into this thing over, somebody came complaining about the football coach, okay? Well, there just so happened to be a member of the board that ran for that position just to can that football coach. So, you know, it can be very contentious over the smallest things, and that doesn't have anything to do with kids learning. Well, I guess learning football. So, but anyway, board members have to be very careful.
Thank you.
Senator Starnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Jim or others. Just remember, too, that one member is not the board. And so, unfortunately, at times, some members get to speaking as a representative of the board. They're representing themselves in that position. They are not the Board of Education. They're one of 7 members, and that sometimes gets lost.
Thank you. And also, and Madam Chair, if I may make a further comment, which hadn't came up yet, but in this bill, it talks about individual board members going into buildings whenever they can. They're still a board member. They're not, and that's a citizen. They are not, and they should act as a board if they go into buildings. So, thank you for.
Okay, well, that brings up a question. So are you saying that the building should be off limits to individual citizens or board members?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying this bill states that a board member can go into any building at any time when it's open, acting as a board member. They're acting as a citizen, not as a board member, in my opinion.
Why do you think that? Because as a board member, boy, how am I going to get a better idea of what's going on in our school buildings and form relationships with staff and with the administration if I'm not in those buildings interacting and seeing what's going on? I would think that we would encourage that, not discourage that.
For some people, yes, we should. Most people, we should encourage it. But for some, they're out looking for dirt on individuals. I hate to say that, but that does happen.
Well, I think that's kind of a pessimistic view of board members and kind of impugns their character. I mean, my goodness, they're not making a penny for doing this business, and I would like to do, you know, we in education always tout the 7 norms of collaboration, assuming positive intentions, and I would hope that we would extend that same courtesy to our board members. I do think we have another question. Senator Gossage.
Thank you. This question's for Leah Fleiter, I believe. Do we know how many school boards currently list their phone numbers, email addresses?
I don't, I'm sorry.
You don't know that? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Committee, any other questions? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I just want to build off the point that you were just making. So, then is it acceptable, if we're not going to require that school districts permit their Board of Education members to enter buildings, is it acceptable that school boards have policies that prohibit school board members from entering facilities? Because we know that that has happened in the state of Kansas.
I assume you're directing that to me. No, there shouldn't be a policy that says they can't, but do you want a policy that says that anybody can go in at any time?
I'll answer that yes, as long as they've met the security requirements, and those are public buildings paid for by the taxpayers. They're the parents' children's. You bet. I think they should be open to the public as long as they have met the security requirements. And I know for my building, they had to scan in with their driver's license and make sure that they did not have anything that would be harmful to children, and check in the office. We had security provisions, but you bet. I think they should be open. Senator Petty.
I hate to disagree with the chair, but I mean, coming into a building and then being able to access any place in the building are pretty much two different things. You come in, you check in, if I have a parent come in, the office calls me and says, hey, Johnny's mom's here to pick him up. They don't say, they don't allow the mom just to wander the halls, because now you're now creating, I think, a safety issue, because, I mean, she's just checked in. She's not necessarily, maybe she's going to go to 2 other rooms. So schools have protocols for how students are accessed at their buildings, and also how parents are, or a person that's listed as on their that can pick them up, can access them. This particular part of the bill, when it says members of the school board may access school district property, including any school building and attendance center, my question would be, the comment, I don't know if this does then include that it has to go through the process that's in place by that school. And if that opens it up to being able to go any place in a building, I'm not, as an employee, when there was a school board member or a superintendent that came into the building, usually the principal knew that they were coming. The principal might say, hey, there's going to, might give an announcement earlier in the day letting you know, just as a common courtesy to the staff that works there. And this really opens it up to anybody. I would agree. I think that person is not, if I visit, if any of you have taken the opportunity, which I'm sure many of you have, to visit schools in your school districts, I would hope that you have checked in with the superintendent or the principal to say, hey, I'd like to come visit your building. I mean, it's just a common courtesy. This just makes it sound like you could come any time for any reason. And I'm sorry, but I think I have to agree with the person that was testifying, Jim, about the fact that it could be just looking for dirt because you've heard a hearsay about something. I heard this. And so you're looking for a specific, unfortunately, that's common. I mean, that's human nature that there's going to be some people that are going to do that. And so this is so wide open, it makes it very, I think, unsafe for everyone.
First of all, I don't believe I said the public should have unfettered and just wander the buildings, but I do believe they should be accessible to the public. And I think that if a community member wants to come in and see what's going on, they should be accommodated. And the school can have policies in place as to how that looks so that you don't have people just roaming throughout the building. Agree with that. But a school board member who has the ultimate responsibility for that district should be able to go into any school building unannounced to see what is going on. You say it's a common courtesy. We all know, let's just be honest, if we're gonna disparage someone, we all know why it's announced. It's because when you know a school board member is going to be in your building, you're going to make sure that you are on your best behavior, and it's not an accurate reflection, or it may be, of what's going on in that school during that day. And as a school board member, I need an accurate picture of what is going on, and I think that is transparent. And it should be welcome that as a school board member who has responsibility for that district, they should have access to those schools when the schools are open. So Senator Gossage, and then we're going to close.
Madam Chair, I fully agree. Boy, I guess things have changed a lot from when I was in the classroom, but we were so proud of what was going on in our classroom that we'd be proud to have a board member, a parent, one to come and sit at the back of the classroom and observe, what was going on, maybe even assist with having a small reading group, read to this person. Look at the learning centers, whatever need to be. I didn't need advanced notice, that a school board member was coming in. It's kind of sad because sometimes when I ask about, are you taking advantage of like local grandmas or other people that could go through a security check or would be happy to come in and read or listen to students read or help in the classroom, I always get a lot of hum-haws. Yeah, well, we don't do a lot of that now, security and this kind of thing. And I think, what a shame that we don't take advantage of some of the community. So I realize we're talking about school board members explicitly here, but I think we're missing an opportunity I think there would be fewer rumors, fewer people coming in that I'm hearing to look for disparaging things. If we were more open to what we're doing in the classroom or what's going on in the school. And I honestly happen to have a more optimistic opinion of what I think is happening in the schools. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments, we are going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 47 committee. We are due on the floor shortly, but I would like to work Senate Bill 50. I think we can get that one done today. So I will ask the reviser, Tamara Lawrence, just to give us a quick refresher on what that bill is. Tamara?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 50 would establish uniform interest rate provisions for service scholarship programs administered by the State Board of Regents.
Any questions for the reviser? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Senator Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that this committee pass out Senate Bill 50 favorably.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Shane. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That bill passes. I would love to say we could get another one up and out, but I think the next couple are going to take a little bit more time, and I don't want to shortchange that process. Committee, I am being told there is a definite possibility we will be online tomorrow due to the weather. Watch for announcements, but we will have our hearings that are scheduled tomorrow, whether via WebEx or in person should the storm just go around Topeka. So stay tuned, but we will plan on at least having those hearings. Senator Petty.
So, Madam Chair, I think that's great, but I will say that last Friday, I had technical, I don't really think it was from my end, and you had my colleague had technical issues as well. First there was a video, then there wasn't a video, then there was audio, then there wasn't audio. So just heads up, there seems to be some issues going on with our WebEx.
I appreciate that, and we'll just make the most of it. We are running out of time, and personally, I can't afford to lose a day of hearings or committee work, so we will make the most of it. Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's appropriate, as we've been talking about transparency and making sure that people are all heard. And again, Cindy, thank you for all of your work. But as we're working bills, I know Senate 55, we were told there were 400 pieces of testimony. 87, I don't think is up online. We are asking for our Kansans to engage in this process, and then we're looking at, because of this condensed session, to have these, but we don't have access and our constituents don't have access to that. So I don't know, and this is no on your staff or anything, but I do think we need to figure out what is going on, because I think this is across the board, being able to have access to all of this testimony. So thank you.
I appreciate that concern, and thank you for that reminder. Committee, we do know that there are some amendments coming on 87, so we will pass over that one until those are in. So, and thank you for being patient, and I do know it's a concern. We are trying to get that as soon as we can, but thank you, Senator Sykes. Seeing no other business before this committee, we are adjourned.